Hello and welcome to Beyond the Algorithm. I'm your host, Aarti Samani. I work with companies to help them incorporate AI into their growth plans. I also talk about it a lot at conferences, in articles, and here on this show. Over the past 20 years or so, we have seen a recognition of the important role that data plays in every function within a business. We've heard phrases like data-informed, data-driven, data-led really take off, and we've seen chief data officers taking their rightful positions at executive tables. For a long time, though, their focus needed to be on technology, hygiene, governance. But now that the industry has matured and AI is taking firm roots, focus has to shift to how we make that data AI ready. A lot of the products we see in the market today are actually data products. With a strategy tied to the business goals and an engaging narrative, these products have seen very successful market adoption. For CDOs, to get AI ready though, there needs to be an AI vision in the organization, an AI strategy. At Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in March 2024, analysts highlighted that companies which prioritize AI as their strategic tool outperform their peers 80% of the time. Correlating to that is a 30% difference in net income. These numbers are not insignificant. Harnessing the organization's collective intellect, redefining metrics to be business-oriented, and helping to shape that AI vision are very much part of a chief data officer's remit now. So, is the chief data officer role reshaping to be a chief AI officer role? Does the makeup of the data team change? Does that team need more business acumen? To answer these and other questions, I have invited Mayze to join us today. Brings us over 25 years of technology and data experience across media, FMCG, finance, and retail consulting. Multinational organizations such as Lloyds Banking Group, Mediacom, and Walgreens Boots Alliance have gained revenue streams as a result of Dai's data strategies. As the first global head of data and AI at WPP, one of the world's largest advertising companies, Dai harnessed the organization's collective intellect to set up data and AI strategy and to build out a data and AI literacy program. I am delighted to welcome Mayze. Let's deep dive and go beyond the algorithm. Dai, welcome to the show. I'm so pleased to have you here with us today.
Hi there, Aarti. Thanks for having me.
So, Dai, as we kick in, help us understand what is the role of the first global head of data and AI of one of the world's largest advertising agency?
Well, that's a good opening question. And I was the first one. I call myself a first generation chief data and AI officer, where you potentially have a new central team, but at WPP we aren't fully centralized. So I'm seeing different types of roles depending on whether there's a centralized data team or not. WPP did not. We had a new CEO in 2018 and creating a new central CTO team. So I thought, as someone in the center of this new corporate center at WPP who wasn't going to ever have a massive team and largely working on influence over power, that the role needed to be about driving cultural change. And we all know that it's the people who stop or accelerate cultural change. And I thought to actually be part of a creative transformation company that really does some brilliant work, but to really explore the role of data and then subsequently AI in the work that we do as part of the creative process. So that's how I started to really think about creatively telling data stories and using data to tell creative stories. I did it both ways.
That's fascinating. I love that. Creative ways to tell data stories and data to tell creative stories. It's a nuance that so many organizations miss and therefore don't gain the maximum value from the data that they have within the business. So I have met many chief data officers from a range of backgrounds, PhDs on the one end of the spectrum and pure commercial on the other. What is a typical chief data officer profile, and how do they vary by company, by size, by sector, and even geographies?
Oh, typical is a funny word, isn't it? So with my data head on, I'm going to say there's no such thing as typical. However, I do see different lenses. So in small to medium-sized companies, it's often the head of data science or a practitioner who's moved to head up a team. I'm part of the Gartner Evanta Chief Data Officer group, and that's a lot of very large companies, the Chief Data Officer, and a lot of us are quite similar. So we look after the strategy, the literacy, the cultural change, and the bit that differentiates largely in the roles that I can see is whether you own the platform or not, whether there is a central platform or not. And I saw on LinkedIn someone saying, oh, us chief data officers data meshing themselves out of a job, which I thought was really interesting, because I think it can be more challenging to keep reinventing and stay relevant depending on the structure of the organization. So I think whether it's a central team, whether tech central, is it part of the CTO team, the CIO team, the CFO team? There's no typical reporting line for the chief data officer either. So there's a number. I try and simplify my whole life in 2x2 matrices, and I can't do that with the chief data officer role, because it's so dependent on the nature of the company.
Yeah. And do you see any differences in regions? So does it look different in Asia versus North America versus Europe?
I think the lens isn't by region, it's by data maturity. So I think if culturally you've explored and established the tangible value of data, so that may be by industry, retail, digital first organizations, banks, automotive to a degree, are quite far ahead in actually realizing if you get a good reciprocity between your customer and your data collection, that you can see the tangible value, and then to accelerate that is easier. Whereas I see consumer packaged goods, for example, maybe slightly less mature because they've always had a third party between themselves and their consumer. And so some of those companies are working on starting with data literacy before they start to try and collect all the data, because in reality it's quite hard to know. If you sell a pen, how much data do you think you should get from your consumer or your customer is very different from a car. So I think the tangibility of the value, if it's already established. I used to work for dunnhumby, and it was really clear there from a Tesco perspective on the value of the data that the club card holders would give. And that value exchange and the reciprocity was so clear that then they were able to do more and more with that because the trust was there. But I think some other companies are at the earlier end of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's not by the size of the organization, the region, the sector, it's the data maturity. So two companies within the same sector could have very, very different chief data officer profiles. They may or may not even have those people in their organizations. It really depends on the level of data maturity and how much investment has been made in their data strategy to date.
And it's a really good point, because I'm actually surprised at how many companies don't have a chief data officer. And chief privacy officer came about with GDPR, and that's a really strong role that I think will continue. But I do think the chief data officer, I think companies are still wondering whether they need one, do they want one, can IT do it, what is the role? And I think it's a bit of a flux time for the chief data officer role.
Yeah, I can imagine there is a lot of confusion around it. There is a justification of do we need it, which is a great segue actually into the next question which I want to explore, and that is, how do you measure the impact of a chief data officer in an organization? What are the top and bottom line numbers that they impact, and how do we measure their ROI?
This is a problem that's kept me awake at night. So I think there's a number of things. Firstly, I think, like many technology projects, data management's very hard to measure the ROI, and it's almost a defensive strategy. So investing in data governance, proper data cleansing, making sure the data is safe and scaled, etc., I think is a cost that the business needs to absorb. I think companies, when they start to think about how much consumer data they have, I think they overvalue it on its monetization opportunity. And I think individuals overvalue how much their data's worth too. So I think the economics of data ownership is still not there. I think there's a naivety in how much it's going to cost and what value. It's the value of knowing your audience, and I think that is, and then I think for data literacy, what is the value of training your people? There's numerous KPIs. I tend to do at WPP engagement and how many people are going through our data literacy program. We've got a tie-in with Oxford University. We've got senior leaders going through Oxford AI for Business Diploma. It pains me because it's not an exact science, but I do say, have you stayed longer as a result of this? Have you generated income? It can't really, in my experience, be bottled down into here's the power of the data as a variable in any economic or econometric modelling on the exact value. And I think that's the problem, and I think that's what's causing some of this flux in the CDO role. How can I unpack the value that my team do, even though we know that we have helped a lot of people win business, we have helped a lot of clients make great decisions. Great decisions should translate into revenue growth, but I think it's very hard. And as I heard somebody on a podcast say, I can't do the ROI, so what I want to do is make sure that our stakeholders know that the data and AI team played a strong role in that growth, and maybe that's where we need to be heading first.
Yeah, interesting. So where does AI play into this? Because data is the bedrock of everything that is AI, right? And I'm often hearing business leaders say, we need to go and do this thing, which is AI. How do we get there really quickly? Which tool do we need? Which language model do we need? And actually, when I look and evaluate their organization, they don't even have a data strategy, right? So where do we sit there? What are chief data officers now responsible to own AI initiatives within the organization as well? Does that change their role in any way? And what part do they have to play in driving the business strategy forward?
So I almost think chief data officer, if they stay where they are, they'll become chief structured data officers, and the chief AI officer will become the chief unstructured data officer. And I don't think that's right, but I can see that generative AI has enabled a different type of leader in this space to get a seat at the table. I have worked with one chief data officer who changes their job description with their board every year, and I really liked that because I can imagine they will become naturally a chief data and AI officer. I'm leaning towards the roles merging because AI is potentially as its simplest terms, a use case of data, but the breadth of data that's getting used because of this new AI capability and the UI that LLMs have now got enables a different type of data analysis that we haven't had before. And I think it's really exciting. But I do think the more mature chief data officers who are used to data governance, setting the strategy, making sure it fits with the business goals, making sure that the business is kept safe, I think the roles should sit together.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say there will be a chief structured data officer and a chief unstructured data officer. It makes total sense when you put it like that. I just hadn't thought about it from that perspective. When you have to change your job description every year or every X period of X number of months, is that because the evolution of is that because the market is maturing, the evolution of data initiatives are changing, and therefore it paves a natural progression path for someone like that, for somebody who is in a CDO role at the moment?
Well, I think this individual is inspiring because I think he will outlive the tenure of most chief data officers, and I wish I was in a position to get board approval of my job description every year, because I think then you're managing expectations. And what I'm seeing in the market with senior chief data officers is there's a struggle right now on what are the expectations. There's a lot of big numbers being bandied around with AI. I think AI for efficiency gains is easier to measure than AI for revenue. I think efficiency and helping people do their jobs better and quicker and faster is an easier thing, but you can't keep cutting. That's not a business growth strategy. So I appreciate the challenge there, but I think I sense the tiredness of CEOs with their chief data officers, and that's an observation. So I haven't spoken to CEOs. Are you a bit bored with your chief data officer being a cost center? But having spoken to CDOs, that's the vibe we're getting. And maybe it's on them, us, on not quick enough to show value, to shout about the value. Maybe we've let stakeholders take credit for growth when we need it. And I think there's a very complex ecosystem going on there of data being part of everything, and therefore doesn't necessarily own anything. But I think the ones that really get to show this is what I'm going to deliver, do you all buy into this, and the role we play in the business, I think it's something that maybe we should all be doing.
So that means that CEOs and other executive members on the leadership team have a big part to play, right? They have to buy into this, to the role of the CDO, to the initiatives that they are delivering, and not go beyond that perception of it being a cost center to it being the underlying fuel that powers growth in the organization. So we are seeing a lot of narrative around the appointment of senior AI leaders, and this mostly seems to be coming from the United States, less so from Asia. Now, given that businesses in Asia are much further ahead in the AI adoption journey, it surprises me somewhat. So in your view, what is the composition of an AI team? And again, akin to CDO, how should their success and impact be measured?
Well, what I like about this question is there's almost an assumption that if you're further ahead with the utilization and adoption of AI, then you should have a team. But maybe it's the reverse is true. Maybe Asia just skipped the need for a team to be on the side, and naturally teams have, through intellectual curiosity and willingness for continuous improvement or adoption of new technology, they actually don't need an AI team because they're using it and they've adopted it. And like digital for many teams was on the side, and now we don't have digital teams, particularly in many places, because companies have gone through their digital transformation. Maybe in the organizations in Asia that they've done an AI transformation without it being a separate team, that people have just picked up the tools, had to play with it, found where the value is, and they've got ahead and it's embedded in the organization. I mean, I'd love for data to be like that, but I think we're still away from that. But I think the companies in the market in Asia and elsewhere in the world that have the highest market cap are data literate and heavy data users. So I think there's a correlation there. If you do have a staff, employee culture that they'll just use what tools are available to be excellent at their work, I think you probably don't need to have separate teams.
It's an interesting observation that the companies across the world who have been very successful have had data maturity, investment in data, and also data literacy within the organization. So I'm a big fan of frameworks, system, and mental models. That's just how I think. But given the novelty of this topic around AI strategy, AI leadership, I don't believe that there are just one or two standards that work. And I change my frameworks, I change my mental model, I evolve them with every project that I work on, with every conversation that I engage in. And I'm always curious to learn what other people are using out there. So, what are some of your favorites?
So my first out the door favourite was set by WPP's Chief AI Officer, Daniel Hume, which was 6 types of AI deployment. And I liked it because whilst obviously data and AI strategy should ladder up to business strategy, actually deconstructing AI so that it was more accessible in what it can do, because I think there was an absolute bias last year of almost all AI being generative AI, and other types of AI are available. So I really liked the 6 types, which I will talk you through. But as I'm thinking about this, I'm laddering them into 2 groups of structured and unstructured data, because I think, given what we've been saying about AI should come in the CDO role, and if you've got a data maturity, AI comes next in the structured data. So what can AI do with structured data? Well, it can automate processes. So I'm reading at the moment about CV sorting and what keywords you have to have in your CV. That's all an automated process. If you're being a pedant, probably could say that's not necessarily AI, but I think that's one of the roles for AI. And that can do structured and unstructured data, to be fair. But I think the automation that's been around for decades in terms of search, response, and recommendations, it's a very accessible entry point for a company to start using AI. And then actually really mining the data on getting insights, or getting the models to make decisions for you. So they're my 3: automation, insights, and decision making within structured data. And then looking at unstructured data and where these next 3 in terms of the framework are really growing. So generating content, and by content I mean code, image, videos, music, multimodal, mixed quality within these. I think still very much behaving like a work experience in many areas, even though it's extremely quick and clever, but does need quite a lot of quality assurance. And then you've got digital humans, and that technology has moved insane speed. I did an avatar of myself when was it, 2020, and I had to read for about an hour, and when I redid it last year, it was more like 15 minutes. And I think the I can't say authenticity because it's not, because it's fake, but I think the likeness of these digital humans is actually terrifying. But brilliant use cases of, being able to have CEOs present to their teams in the local language. I think from a translation and accessibility of scale, there's brilliant use cases for digital humans. WPP, we use deep fakes to train our people on AI, and it's a really easy way to create a load of content in multiple languages. And then the last one I've saved for you, Aarti, is my favorite, and I don't know quite what to call it, but it's kind of supporting humans. So using AI to make humans better. And my favorite in all case studies ever is from VML, which is the WPP agency, and it's called I Will Always Be Me. And it's with the insight that the majority of people with motor neuron disease will lose their voice. And what a brilliant way to use this technology. It enables people with motor neuron disease to capture their voice. So when they lose their voice, they actually have a realistic version of their voice so they can keep communicating. And I was presenting this at Oxford University at the AI for Business diploma that WPP have done. And someone came up to me at the end and she said, I'm from New Zealand. My mum has motor neuron disease. We used this technology so she could make a speech at my sister's wedding. I mean, honestly, I think we were all in tears. It was just incredible. And they're the stories that I really love, because that is supporting humans. That's not a versus conversation. That's very much a with.
Yeah, I have goosebumps just listening to that very touching story. Yeah, you're right that there are so many applications, and I love the way you break down the threes of the structured data, the threes of the unstructured, and then the data that is generated by technology. So generative data, which allows us to do a lot of things that we weren't able to do before. So tell me, Dai, in the context of AI strategy and leadership, what whispers are you hearing from the market?
Well, it's really interesting, and I don't know where it will settle. I'm hearing a lot of companies thinking they need to become an AI company and going to one of the big four consultancies to see where those opportunities are. I'm hearing a lot of companies thinking that they can create a load of efficiencies, and that is going in two parts. So, and the impact on share price is not consistent, which I'm finding interesting. So you might have one company saying, we're going to be half the size in terms of headcount, and share price might go up. And other companies, maybe it's dependent on the industry, stay the same and the share price has not gone up. So I'm wondering if there was a bubble of, yeah, we're going to hit it and we're only going to be half the size. And now I think people are realizing, or shareholders, that maybe that isn't a great thing if unemployment massively goes up and we displace a lot of people. And I think there's a realism on top of that, is that most full jobs, I don't think, will be displaced by AI anytime soon. It'll be parts of jobs. So maybe initially an hour a week because we've automated meetings or minutes or actions or CV or invoice payment or whatever, maybe that back office stuff. What do companies do with that free time? And that was a really interesting conversation I had recently with a client on how do they make sure they purposely benefit as a business from that free time that they're creating with their teams, especially if you're not displacing entire roles. So I think that's the vibe. And a bit like with data, most companies think other people are further ahead than them, but they're not really.
Yeah.
Further ahead than them, but they're not really.
Right. Now, if there's one thing that really keeps me awake at night at the moment, that is job polarization. I really worry about it. The fact that there will be a small pool of individuals with certain skills will be able to command a significant salary, while on the other hand, there are talented, experienced, ramped up people who are passionate about their jobs, the companies they work with, will be out of work, will be redundant because money has to be made available to bring these new skills into the organization. Now, this polarization creates all sorts of social problems, right? So what do you think is the solution to all this?
I share your losing sleep. I mean, I think the digital divide in society hasn't been fixed, and this may make this worse. The way we categorize it at WPP is reskill, deep skill, and upskill. And we did that to try and incorporate all 109,000 employees. And up to last year, it really was just about deep skilling. So if you are a data practitioner, how we make sure you've got the right breadth of skills and you keep investing in those skills, and we keep investing in those skills. And then upskilling, how do you make sure that everybody in the organization has the data and AI fundamentals? And then reskilling, how might you use the great loyalty, talent, business knowledge that people have, and rather than release them out of the business, actually reskill them into something. And I'm probably going to get this wrong because I don't know the exact detail, but I read somewhere and I loved it that IKEA have been reskilling some of their their call center people to be working in customer service in a different way, and that's helping people design their kitchens. And I read about Aviva, who asked their employees, do you think your role could be displaced with AI? Will you talk to us and we can work on it? And I love both those examples because it's companies who've decided to keep their people and then make AI work. And I think that's a core decision that companies need to make. Do we want to get more out of our people and use this technology to maybe reset the direction the business is going in, or do we actually just need less people and we'll just use AI? And I love the IKEA and Aviva examples.
Yeah, they're both great case studies, right? So the customer service automation is the one that comes the most often, right? Because it's a classic example of how AI will automate customer service, and therefore we will have all these people who have nothing to do because AI will do their jobs for them. But actually transitioning them into other value add areas of customer service, which is not simply picking up the phone and answering queries on the phone. In this case, in the case of IKEA, it is in the form of kitchen redesign. I think that's fascinating. And a great example of how putting customers and employees at the center of your strategy is very, very important, and also delivers ROI. It delivers value, right? So your employees already know how to serve your customers, redeploy, so retain them, reskill them, and deploy them into other areas of business. That means you're creating a win-win dynamic for all parties involved in the situation. So that's a great example. Now, one thing I hear a lot is what I call the AI dilemma. So efficiency gains through automation increases productivity, right? That's like a classic statement that a lot of businesses talk about. Now, in agency models or business models where you are charging clients by time, when your staff have been productive and they've done 5 hours or 8 hours of work within half a day or 3/4 of a day, what do you do with that extra time in terms of billing or charging the client, in terms of redeploying that time in other areas? How do you see, and how are we going to see this model change when we are talking about billable hours, agency model type engagements?
I think the agency model is going to have to evolve into an output-based pricing, because if it's about hours and agencies are investing themselves in technology and the upskilling, I think it doesn't make sense if the agency doesn't get at least some of the benefit from that investment. Otherwise, I think there's a disincentive to innovate if you don't get the benefit. Years ago, I used to be an account manager in a factory, and I am reading some of the contracts between the customers and the factory, and the customers would expect the savings to be passed on to them. And I remember thinking, even at the time, well, what if you invest in huge amount of automation and technology? Where's that investment come back? There's got to be a tiered or a shared incentive to innovate and to be quicker and cheaper. So I think there's going to be different models coming out. I don't think it's going to work if agencies have to pass on the savings in the entirety and people are just doing less billable hours. That's not actually going to be a sustainable model. And if you put sustainability as a lens on all data and AI, I think as a focus, it does change some of the decisions you make, and particularly on how many people you might release into the community. If you're thinking about 5, 10, 15 years in a growth strategy, you might want to keep those people. Using the IKEA example, the people who've been in the call center and customer service, they are the ones that are on the front line. They know the problems, they know the customers, they know what's going on in that business way quicker than anybody else, and they're the ones that you should keep as really good skills. So if we were putting a sustainability lens on this, then actually being resourceful in what to do with these people and still offering a good value exchange with either clients in the agency model or customers using IKEA, it does need to be set. But I don't think just charging for time is going to work anymore.
So rethinking the whole business model itself, rather than trying to muscle or work around the technology evolution that we are seeing. Thank you, Dai. Now, the one question I ask every guest who comes on the show is, as we move beyond the algorithm, what is the one question that leaders at executive tables and in boardrooms should be asking but are not?
Oof, this is a beast of a question, Aarti. Well, anyone who's got this far, and well done, in listening to this will know that I'm really a people person with the lens of data and AI. So I would love more conscious decision making on the role of AI and data in organizations. And as I just mentioned with sustainability, we don't know what the tech's going to be in 10 years time, but what kind of employer are we going to be? How are we going to be prepared to maybe leave some profit on the table for our future business and sustainability? So it's not a very neat answer to what is a very neat question. So I'm sorry for that. But I do think some really purposeful, thoughtful decisions on how data and AI will drive growth and not just drive efficiencies.
Yeah. So not make it an afterthought, but really bring it into the boardroom, onto executive tables, and ask the question regularly and do something about it. Mayze, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It has been so insightful. I have learned a whole number of things which I can't wait to go and process and utilize and incorporate in my job. Thank you again for your time and for sharing your insights with us.
Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up another thought-provoking episode of Beyond the Algorithm. A big thank you to Mayze for joining us today and for sharing such invaluable insights from her wealth of experience. Dai's journey and her approach to data and AI, focusing on people, sustainability, and strategic integration of AI into business models, reminds us of the transformative power of thoughtful leadership. Dai's stories and examples underscore the potential of AI not just as a tool for efficiency, but as a catalyst for innovation and growth. As we continue to navigate the complexities of new dynamics, let these insights inspire us to think creatively, act strategically, and lead with purpose. Remember, the future of data and AI in business is not just about the technology itself, but it's about how we, as leaders and innovators, choose to leverage it for the greater good of our teams, our customers, and our society at large. Thank you all for tuning in. If today's discussion sparked new ideas or questions, I would love to hear from you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, leave a comment here, or email me. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries beyond the algorithm.